Welcome to Everything Dog Training with me, John McGuigan. Our goal is to bring you information on dog training methods which work and are kind, cutting through the myth and the folklore to help you have a better behaved, happier, emotionally healthier dog who is a joy to be around.
Hi everybody, and thank you once again for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to me again. I think I said again. So it's 28th of March as I'm recording this, and it's pouring down outside here. Logan's lying in a bed sleeping. We were out earlier on today, and he hates the rain, absolutely hates the rain. So Logan's coat he's got that real short greyhound coat, so it's millimetres thick. And he really does not like the rain at all. And I think it's because of the sound of the rain on his hitting on his ears. So I think that's actually what he doesn't like about it, because when we're out in the rain, he flaps his ears a lot. Anyway, hope you're all well. It's month 3 of lockdown for us in the UK, and it's it's difficult. It's difficult for a lot of people, and it's more difficult for some than others. So if you're listening to me, if you're tuning in again to listen to me, then again, thank you and welcome if this is your first time listening to one of my podcasts. I'm going to talk a little bit about aggression and reactivity today. This is always an interesting topic to cover because of the interest it gets. So it's interesting because of the interest it gets. I think we just have to look at what action film or what movies are popular. So we get the big blockbuster movies, and what news stories gain traction. You know, so this weekend we've seen public disorder in Bristol in England, and it's on a lot in the news. We've got a lot of footage on it, and you'll see stuff on you can look up on YouTube and Facebook about it. So these events, these aggressive and violent events are, and I'll use this word carefully, they're spectacular. They're spectacular to see because of the action, and I think it's a primal thing in us, that we are human animals, and violence and aggression is important to us because it is meaningful for our survival. Okay, so when I do recently I did a couple of classes, evening classes online. I did one, and I can't remember. I think it was I don't remember the topic, but I did one at first, and it was there was 20 people attended it. Okay, and then I did one the next week, and I labelled it to do with aggression and reactivity, and there was 130 or 140 people subscribed to it. And that shows you just our interest in dealing with aggression. Now, what's really I don't want to say galling, but I've said it now. And I'm aware I do that a lot, and it's because I'm recording this live and I'm trying to get the words right. But what is it does kind of it both bemuses me and amuses me when all the information that I put out to do with behavior is behavior. Okay, so the information that I put out is to do with your dog's behavior. So whether it's in the podcasts or my social media content or my online paid courses, behavior is behavior. Okay, and because we don't understand we don't understand well enough how behavior works, then some things become really interesting and some things don't. Now, what I would say is when we're dealing with aggression and reactivity, we're a lot of the time we're at a stage where things have gone wrong. Whereas if we put things in place earlier, then they won't go wrong. So the other content that I put out, you can apply you can apply almost everything. I'm trying to think of an example where you can't apply it, but like almost all of the content that I put out, you can apply to dealing with dogs that are showing aggressive and reactive behaviors. But as soon as I stick this, the marketing on it of, aggression and reactivity, it just becomes popular. Okay. And I get it. I understand. I do understand. But it just it's a kind of bone of contention for a lot of dog trainers and behavior people, because tons of people will come to see behavior stuff, but they won't go to the basics. And I see that when I go to conferences, you know, the aggression lectures and sessions are packed, and the basic ones and other ones are not quite so well subscribed to. And it's just interesting. It's just an interesting commentary on it. Okay, so I'd asked a question a few weeks ago, or last week I think it was, what's the difference between aggression and reactivity in dogs? And I got some really interesting answers. Now, I'm always grateful to people who take time out of their day to contribute. Okay, and I've got a balance between people that contribute stuff which is not great. You know, their opinions are just, their opinions on it or their view on it is not great and doesn't fit with the science of behavior change, versus other good stuff, and whether to comment on it or not. Okay, so if you see my stuff on social media, most of this, just because it's on my page, if a comment's on my page and stays there, doesn't mean that I'm agreeing with it or condoning it. And also have to balance getting into discussions, car crash discussions with people online, especially when I don't know their background. So I can have a discussion. I will have a discussion more readily with an educated person than with an uneducated person. And that's just for my own satisfaction, because I end up spending a lot of time trying to explain to them that their view is wrong. Okay, and I don't mean that arrogantly. I just mean that as they're not educated well enough to be having a discussion with me. It's like, and I know how that does sound arrogant, but it's like me having to try and have a discussion about physics with Stephen Hawkins or Brian Cox, and then telling them that they're wrong. Now, again, I'm not comparing myself to Stephen Hawkins or Brian Cox, and okay, I'm just not, all right, because I know that you just, when you put out content like this, you're constantly having to guard against people. This is what you said, and this is what he said, and this is who he thinks he is. And I really don't. Okay, just try to put out good information to help people. Okay, right. So as a species, we love labeling stuff. We love pigeonholing things. Okay. It's just how we as a species make sense of the world. Okay, so we've got this and not that. Okay, you look at mathematics. Okay, so mathematics for an uneducated person is just about numbers. Okay, but for somebody that's that's studied it as their career and they're an academic in it, or and apply it, it's a way to understand how the world works. Okay, physics is exactly the same, chemistry is the same, okay, and behavior is the same. So when we talk about, you'll hear, if you've listened to anything like to do with dog training, you're hearing things like positive and negative reinforcement. That's just a way for us, not just a way for us, that is a way for us to understand the process of what is going on. Okay, but we came up with these constructs, so they're human constructs. And I know that I use some of the same analogies a lot, but they just stick in my mind. That there's a scene in the one of the Avengers films, and Thor is having a discussion with Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy and the Star-Lord, the Chris Pratt character. And they mention a planet's name, and Thor says, that's a made-up name. That's a made-up word. And Drax says, all words are made up. And that's right. All words are made up. So this is a podcast you're listening to, okay? And a podcast is a word that we have made up so that you can understand what this is, which is audio, digital information delivered to your device, okay? Your tablet or your phone or your computer, okay? So these are just constructs that we've got. So what is a podcast? That's what that is, okay? Now, when I'll give a brief overview of behavior and how it's constructed and how we understand it, okay, and the approach that I take, and then I'm going to look at some of the answers to aggression and reactivity. So I'll give my explanation first. We'll talk a little bit about the some of the stuff that people have contributed, and then I'll circle back to like how I determine it. Okay. All right. So behaviors are verbs. Okay. So I'll look at the model I'll look at is antecedents, which is what happens before the behavior itself. Okay, which is what we're talking about. Okay, and the consequence of doing that behavior. Right, which is basically the feedback loop. Does that behavior work for us or not? So if this is your if this is not your first time listening to this, if this is a subsequent time of listening to this podcast, then you have found listening to my dulcet Scots accent, and that's a joke, okay? So you've found listening to my voice, giving you this information, reinforcing enough that you will choose to do it again. Okay, so that's all I can say about that. Okay, that's all I can say. I have reinforced your behavior of listening to this before, if you're listening to it again. If you're listening to it for the first time, if you don't like this information and you don't like how I present it, you'll not come back. Okay, and if you do like it, you will come back. All right, so I will have either reinforced your behavior or not, depending on whether you do this behavior again of listening to me. So that's what you're specifically doing, putting those earbuds in, you know, sticking your smart speaker on, whatever it is, and listening to it while you're washing the dishes, okay, or driving or doing your commute. Okay, so what's the dog doing specifically? Okay, so when we're talking about aggression and reactivity, we're looking at specifically what the dog is doing. So describe to me what the dog is doing. Are they lunging and barking? Are they snarling? Are they showing their teeth? Okay, what's their posture like? Is their head down? Is their head up? You know, where's the tension in their body? What is their tail doing? Okay, so all of those behaviors, if I describe a group of behaviors as the dog is lunging and barking at me, snapping and snarling, okay, jumping forward, all right, and the tail is high and the hackles are up, so we've got piloerection, so those hackles along the dog's spine, okay, hair standing on the back end. I can describe that as aggression. Okay, now I could describe it as aggression, okay, or I could describe it as reactivity, okay, either or. Okay, but you see how I've described specifically what the dog's doing, and I could actually describe it as, we're going to call that banana behaviors, or we're going to call that set A of behaviors. All right, so what is the dog doing? Now we can also look at how intense that is. Is the dog, you know, are they barking oh like that? Are they barking whoop, 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 whoop? All right, so those are two quite different intensities of behavior. Okay. When the behavior starts to the behavior stops, how long does that barking episode last from the first bark to the second bark? Sorry, first bark to the last bark. And then the frequency of those barks. So if the barking lasts for 30 seconds, do we get 30 barks? Do we get 60 barks? Or do we get 10 or 4? Okay, so that gives us a frequency. All right, so those are a number of parameters that we can look at and say that we can now gauge behavior change based on those. Okay. All right. And then how quickly does the dog recover back to the state it was in roughly before the barking episode started. Okay. So we've got, that's what the dog is doing specifically. Okay. Now, so that's the behavior. That's the B of our ABC. Now we've got our antecedents, is when does that happen? Okay, so under what conditions does that happen? And we're looking at the distance from our dog to the target of what the dog is targeting those behaviors at. Okay, and I'm careful not to use the words aggression and reactivity here just now. Okay, so what is the dog targeting those behaviors at? What are they aiming at? What are they looking at? What are they barking at? Okay, and how far away is that? Okay, so what are they barking? How far away are they barking at? Okay, and then is it every single dog? Does the dog bark at every dog or just some? Okay, so those are the antecedents, and then we can look at what we are doing during that time as well. So is there tension in the lead? Are we staring at the other dog? Are we holding our breath and so on? Okay, so all these can be contributing factors. And then what is the consequence of our behavior? So as I was saying to you before, the consequence, if you're listening to this before, if you have listened to my podcast before and you're listening to it again, the consequence of you listening to this is that you have received enough information from this that you want to come back and learn more. Okay, so you'll listen to it again. So if your dog is, say your dog is frightened of another dog and lunges and barks and the other dog is going away, the other dog goes away, your dog has just been massively reinforced for getting that dog out of his space. Okay. Now, most of these lunging and barking behaviors that people describe as aggression and reactivity are either, all of them will either be distance increasing. I want the object of the targeted behaviors to go further away, distance increasing, or I want them to come closer. Okay. All right. And it can also be both. All right. So it can be kind of, I don't want to have to deal with that dog socially. I do want to have to deal with that dog socially. And the third option is I do want to deal with that dog socially, but I've got no clue how to do it. Okay. And that's where the conflict comes in. So the dog wants to go to the party, but has no clue how to act when they get there, and then acts like a social buffoon, and then possibly gets into kind of spats and fights. Okay. And these skirmishes that you see. Okay. So those are our consequences. All right. Now, so that's our ABCs. The behavior itself is based on our learning history. Okay, so what has worked for our dogs or us in the past, any being on the planet, what has worked for us in the past, the genetics, okay, and the current conditions. Okay, so if you look at a zebra, if a zebra is being chased by a lion or a zebra, depending on where you are in the world, okay, if a zebra has been chased by a lion, it is not likely to climb a tree, okay, and that's got nothing to do with learning history or the current conditions. That's to do with the fact that they've got hoofs incapable of climbing trees, okay, whereas if a baboon has been chased by a lion, it's very likely to climb a tree because its genetic ability allows it to climb, okay, but you see how they're both escape behaviors, all right, they both learned lion approaches, we could get killed, if we run away, we will be safe. Okay, and the current conditions there is just the lion chasing them. Okay, so that's the genetic element. All right, and genetics are at play in dogs because of hundreds of years, of thousands of years actually, of artificial selection. So we've bred specific dogs for specific purposes, some of which are more prone to these displays than others. Okay. All right. Now, again, as I've recorded this, I had to start the recording again. So forgive me if I'm repeating myself here, because I now can't remember what I said last time in the first episode that recorded it versus now. I can present easily 2 days on aggression. Okay. And I usually get 2 days is a good number of days on a if I'm presenting it at seminars and stuff like that, or if I'm being hosted elsewhere. And if you're listening to this, just as an aside, hopefully we might be able to start traveling again in 2022. Yes, okay, next year. So if you are interested in hosting me next year somewhere warm and sunny, hopefully, then please do get in touch. info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk. So just as an aside. Okay, so anyway, when I'm presenting international, I'll do a couple of days on aggression. And that's still not enough. Okay, it's enough for a weekend seminar. Okay, any more than that, people start getting fatigued. But it's such a massive topic, and I'm having to give you just a couple of bites here of what is the difference between aggression and reactivity according to a behavioral model. Okay. All right. So this is not exhaustive. It's just to get us thinking about these things. Okay. Now, comments that were made on my Facebook, which I'm glad people did comment. Some of them are and the only way I can describe this is not great. Okay. And again, I don't know what's happening now with Facebook. Is before you used to be able to see people's names when they were commenting, whereas now you can just see their profile picture and you have to click on their profile picture to see their name. So the regulars that I would see, or if I would see people who I know are knowledgeable about dog training, with the right knowledge coming up on my page, I now if they've changed the profile picture and you're seeing these tiny icons on my phone or whatever, or on my computer, it's difficult for me to see, is there weight behind this or not? Okay. And because apparently everybody's an expert and everybody that's had a dog has got an opinion on how to train a dog, this is where we kind of become unstuck a little bit. All right. Now, first one we've got is reactive dogs lunge and bark, okay, and aggressive dogs bite and fight. Okay, now that's actually, I think that's not a bad stab at it. Okay, I mean, you're then saying one is one thing and one is not the other. So, there's a dog who's lunging and barking that doesn't bite and fight. Is he an aggressive dog? Okay, is it an aggressive display he's shown? So there was a great, I did the Seinfeld tour in 2005 when I visited New York. And it was Larry David, who the Curb Your Enthusiasm guy who wrote Seinfeld with Jerry Seinfeld. His old neighbor used to did this Seinfeld tour. So you would meet and you'd go in this big bus and you would drive around the kind of Upper West Side and see all the sights that had been in the show. And Kenny Kramer was the guy's name, and that's who the Kramer character in Seinfeld is based on. Okay, now Kenny Kramer described Larry David as the kind of guy who would scream and bawl at you from one side of the counter, okay, spitting venom at you, but the second that you walked around the other side of the counter to confront him, and he said he saw this happening, he would be completely mute. Okay, so basically what's happening there with Larry David, okay, and we'll take it as you can say that it's happened or it's not. I don't want to slander anybody, right? Okay, this is a story that I've heard from a guy that knows Larry David, okay? Yeah, because you've got to be super careful now. It's bizarre what people complain about. Yeah. So is Larry David being aggressive there, or has he just been reactive? Now, what we might describe in humans is he's just been emotional, okay, or he's been angry, okay, but there's no physicality behind that emotion, okay. So you see how when we start talking about these things, where we do become bogged down in some of the details about this. So you could turn around and say he's been very aggressive, you know, but if you're to challenge him physically and he backs off. And this happens with dogs. So a little dog might lunge and bark to get the other dog to go away. But the second the big dog challenges the little dog will not fight, because he knows he can't fight, because he knows the size that he is in comparison to the big dog. So does that mean that he's not aggressive just because he doesn't bite and he won't fight? Okay. So you see how that we've got some problems with that description. Okay. Next one we've got aggression tries to do something, but reactivity tries to avoid something. Okay, now what I am looking at, you've got, again, it's when we've got, lots of this takes deep thought. Okay, we actually have to sit down and think about this and have, this is where, when going to seminars, it is for dog trainers is good, because we sit around the bar at night like a bunch of sad geeks talking about all this stuff in great detail, okay, to death. Sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's not. Okay, so we've got aggression tries to do something. Okay, so for talking sake, the aggression is trying to bite, but reactivity is trying to avoid the bite. Okay, now, as far as aggression goes in a species, aggressive displays are there in order to prevent the need for fighting. Okay, so you look at it, two guys squaring off against each other, like a doorman and a punter, okay, and a member of the public. So the bouncer is trying to stop the guy from getting in, okay, and a good doorman, a good steward, or a good bouncer will be doing lots of de-escalation stuff there, okay, and the guy's wanting to try and get in, but both of them potentially are trying to avoid the fight, okay, so they're avoiding it. They should be working hard to avoid any violence, okay. So you see how that doesn't really fit either. Okay, the aggression tries to do something which is biting. Okay, but the biting is actually there. The dog's not biting for the sake of biting. The dog is generally biting because he's learned that nothing else will work. Okay, the hand won't stop touching him. Okay, or the dog won't stop coming into his face. So what he does is he bites in order to get that dog to go away, or that hand to go away. Okay, so that's actually avoidance at that point. Okay, I'm doing this because I've learned that nothing else works. The avoiding didn't work, so actually, so I have to now bite in order to get that hand to go away, whereas before I wasn't able to walk away from it. Okay, so that aggression tries to do something, and reactivity tries to avoid something. Again, it's a kind of yes and no. There's some stuff in there that which, on further investigation is not accurate. Okay. Now, this next one is interesting. Somebody has commented, aggression is very still and you can feel the tension. Reactivity is loud and explosive. Okay. Now, again, looking at that ABC model, okay, where's the observable stuff there? The stillness is observable, but the tension is not. Okay, so when I learned, I worked with somebody in my dim and distant past, and this person kept saying to me when I'm working with a dog, you have to feel it. Okay, you have to feel it. And I said to her, no, unacceptable. Sorry, right? Because tell me specifically what I'm looking for, because if you can tell me specifically what I'm looking for, I can look for it and evidence it. Okay, so if I'm not feeling it, does that mean that I'm not working? Okay, and is there not an assumption there that I feel the same as you, feel the same way as you do? Okay, so when you'll walk into again, and this is stuff from my background, and just to give you a little bit, it's not as if I grew up in a particularly violent society. Okay. Some of you will know I was in the police for 18 years, so I had and I worked in uniform for half of that. Okay, so I worked frontline uniform police in the south side of Glasgow for half of that. So I had a fair share of it, and I also grew up in the west of Scotland in the 80s and 90s. Okay, when there was quite a lot of interpersonal violence between young guys. Okay, and that was my background, so I know what a lot of this feels like. Okay, now if I go somewhere now and you say, somebody will say, can you feel the tension? Okay, now if I can feel it and you can just feel it, you're feeling the excitement of the place, that doesn't mean that one of us is right and one of us is wrong, because it's our experience of it. Okay, so that expression there, aggression is very still and you can feel the tension, I'm just going to call kind of BS on that. All right. Now, again, I do understand what they're saying. If you're walking up towards a dog and the dog stops and stares and is dead still, and you can see all that tension in the dog's body, okay, and you'll maybe get a low rumbling under the dog's, in the dog's throat. Those are all warning signs, okay? But you're not feeling the tension. You might be feeling the tension there. You certainly might be, okay? But you're definitely seeing it if you've got eyes, okay? And you're capable of seeing that, okay? But that's only if you know what that body language means, okay? And then reactivity is loud and explosive. Well, does it have to be? Okay. So if a dog runs round in the end of the lead excitedly, he's certainly reacting to the other dog or to the person. Okay. But it might not be explosive. He might just be running around, and there might not be any barking. Okay. So you see how that's not really accurate either. Okay. Right. Okay. Now this one again, and the purpose of me putting this information out on this podcast is so that we can. It's just to get you thinking about, what it is and what it isn't. Okay. So this one is aggression starts within the dog and reactivity starts outside the dog. Now that's an opinion somebody holds. And again, I'm not, putting the boot in or, bashing somebody for expressing that opinion, but I don't actually know what that means. Okay. And how would you tell? All right. But if you were to go, if the person who's commented here has felt that they know enough to express that opinion publicly, Okay, and this is the danger of lots of this stuff if we don't actually look at this critically and from a through a behavioral lens, and I mean a scientifically behavioral lens, all right, according to the rules of behavior change. This person feels that they have enough knowledge to express this publicly. Okay, so if they express that to somebody else who's a naive learner in this, and that person then takes that to heart and then goes, yeah, that's right. Okay, that is right. So it means that so reactivity starts outside the dog, okay, and aggression starts within the dog. So if I move towards the dogs, if the dog is lying, sleeping, and in pain, okay, if I move towards that dog and move the dog off the couch or the comfortable, cushion that he's sleeping on, and he turns around and bites me, who started that? Okay, now granted, the pain is within the dog. Okay, the pain is not mine, but if I hadn't moved towards the dog, he wouldn't have bitten me. Okay, and the bite, me moving towards the dog, is outside the dog. It's not inside the dog. Okay, so you see how this stuff is so. It's why we have to be so critical, and I mean critically analytical about this stuff. Okay, and we have to look at it and go, is that actually right? And sometimes when I see some of these comments, and I look at them and I just go, like, what a lot of rubbish, like what the hell does that even mean? It's just it's kind of bizarre is the only way I can describe it. And that's just from my own learning. And again, that person, I'm being respectful to that person. They've got an opinion and they do have a right to express it. I just don't think everybody's got a right for their opinions to be taken seriously. So anyway, moving on. All right. Now this one I do like, okay. I don't think it matters because I don't split hairs. Okay, so they're basically, that's the way I go. I don't think if somebody, what is the difference between aggression and reactivity? I don't think it actually matters. All right, and I get how ironic that is, given that I've been talking about the last half hour about aggression and reactivity. Okay, but what we're describing here is what the dog is doing, and I think that's what that person has said. I'm not splitting hairs between the two. Okay, because ultimately it doesn't matter, and I'll circle back to why it doesn't matter later on. Okay, in a few minutes. All right, because I'm aware of the time. Right, next one, aggression is premeditated. Again, bizarre. Okay, is the dog sitting there like that, sitting there in the dead of night, waiting on us getting up in the morning and then going, I'm going to take, I can't wait to see that black dog down the street, because see, when I see that black dog's getting it because he looked at me the wrong way yesterday. All right, so again, aggression is not premeditated. It's just not. Okay. Now, very lastly, this is the last one of the examples I've given. Aggression is a type of drive, and reactivity is a behavior. Okay, so what we've got here, and I don't even know how to begin saying how wrong that is and how much it's just a drive. Okay, what's a drive? So when people say the dog is in prey drive, fight drive, prey drive, chase drive, ball drive, whatever. And I'll hear people talking about this, and these are novice owners, that will email me and they'll say dogs get high prey drive, high chase drive, high play drive. And what they have done there, I think, okay, is they've read stuff online. And because it fits in with a certain view of the world, they go, and it helps us pigeonhole, which we talked about before, this, not that. Okay, we love labeling stuff because it's now like I can understand what's going on there because he's in drive. Okay, but we look at it from a behavioral analytical point of view, and we can start breaking that down to say it doesn't actually tell us much about what's going on. Okay, all right. Okay, so circling back round to that I don't split hairs because I don't think it matters. Okay, that model that I work towards. So tomorrow I am seeing a couple of dogs I'm seeing in the morning. I've got a excuse me, first appointment with a young German Shepherd, okay, who is lunging and barking, all right, at people, okay. So he's a year old, and so he's been a COVID puppy, okay. So he's been, you know, he was bred, reared, adopted during this time last year, okay. So they've gone to his home in May last year, April, May last year, okay, when the whole place was dead, okay. So there's nobody around because everybody's at home because of COVID, okay, and nobody's coming to this family's house, okay. So when a dog now does come, he doesn't know what to do. He's got zero clue how to act. And what I think goes on with these dogs is they then just start lunging and barking. And it's like a child running around when they kind of get, I don't know what to do. So they'll talk really fast and they'll move really fast and they'll run up and down. And a lot of that is, I think, is I'm just trying to dispel how they're feeling. Okay, get rid of that emotion and trying to feel better. So what I looked at there is, what are the conditions? Okay, how close does the person need to be before the dog lunges and barks? Okay, if the person gets close enough to the dog, will the dog bite, or will he just jump around barking? Okay, because those are two quite different things. Okay, one of them is I really don't know what to do, and the other one is I want you to go away. Okay, and that's an assessment on it. Okay, that's what the assessment I'm putting on it. And then what do we do about it? We teach alternative behaviours. Okay, so can you look at that person from a distance quietly? Excellent. We'll reinforce that with a food treat or with play or with distance, either closer or towards the person as we assess. Okay, so you see how when I you know, splitting hairs. If you see, again, okay, people will turn around. I'll get emails from people and they'll say to me, somebody told me that it's fear aggression, which is the hardest aggression to deal with. Okay, so that already puts something in that person's mind about how we approach this going forward. Okay, and that information will then inform the choices that they make. Okay, or if you get told your dog has been dominant, okay, he's doing this because he's been dominant, all right, so you have to be dominant back, and everything that goes with that. Okay, and I won't get into that on today's episode. Okay, but you can see where that goes when we get this duff information getting bandied around at will and listened to. Okay, and again, dog training is a completely unregulated industry, so you've only got my word that I have learned from Ken Ramirez and Susan Friedman and the Clicker Expo faculty and Ian Dunbar, you know, and all these excellent trainers that started me on this journey of science-based dog training. Okay, now there's ways that you could check. You could phone these people up and say, has John McGuigan ever attended one of your seminars? And they would say yes. And then you could say, have you seen him train? Yeah, I've seen some of his videos, and it certainly it's along the same lines of as how we train. You know, he's putting information out that we put out there. Okay, and then you would have to do forensic examination to see whether Susan Friedman or Ken Ramirez are actually any good. Okay, right. But they are, and it's easy to find that stuff out. You could Google them, okay, find out who they are. All right, so you see how we've got all these layers of human stuff going on, which gets in the way sometimes gets in the way of what we're trying to achieve. Okay, now what also happens with this, and this is just a brief story from my own life. I remember when I was in. So two things that I read. I read Tony Robbins' books when I was in my 20s, and completely taken with the guy, you know, as have so many others been, which is why he's sold millions of books. Now, some of his stuff is really, really good, and some of his stuff is absolutely garbage. Okay, it's too simplistic, it doesn't work. So he talks about willpower, and you just need to, you know, that willpower's, you know, it's it's not the thing that we should be looking at. You just need to change your view of the world. Okay. Right. You need to change your view of like, if you don't like healthy food, change your view of it. Okay. But it's not quite as easy as that. Okay. And not everybody can do the same things that he suggests in his books. Okay. Because again, it's too simplistic. He's not an academic. Okay. He's not researched this stuff, doesn't understand the neuroscience of it, the emotional background of it, and so on, so on, so on. So because I learned that when I was in my early 20s, that was formative in the way that I thought. And it took me a long time to get around that. Okay. And then the other one was the Michael Conley books, the Harry Bosch books. But they've made the series on Amazon. And I've been reading the Bosch books for 20 years, something like that now. 17 years, yeah. And one of the lines that he's going to see he goes to see a therapist, and the therapist asks him a question. He says, I've never been one for much introspection. Okay, that was the line in it. Okay. Now, one, it's not accurate, because when the books are written, he's really introspective guy. Okay. All right. But at the time of my learning there, because I'm only reading it, reading it from a different point of view than I am in my life, I go, all right, okay, so you don't really need to introspect. You don't need introspection. Okay, that's not really necessary. Okay, so that stunted me significantly, right? But it's because it was an author that I liked and a character that I liked. Okay, and it took me years to realize, where this came from. All right, I mean, oh no, that's not accurate. One, it's not accurate that you don't need to be you don't need some time of introspection, because you absolutely do. Everybody does. And the second one is that Harry Bosch is introspective. Two things there. So this is, and I know that's kind of, we're going off topic a little bit, but it's when you get these snippets of things which resonate with you, and they resonate so deeply with you that that they can completely change how you view the world, how you act for a long time. Okay. And this is where I was with dog training when I first started. The dominance model of dog training, sorted, it resonated so well. It fitted my view of the world at the time. And if I hadn't had other influences, other great people coming into my life and putting me on a different path and teaching me and being patient with me, then I would possibly, be putting a prong collar or an electric collar on my dog, so this is why these things it's so important that we have, that we think deeply on this stuff, and then look at it and go, is my worldview correct? Is there a different worldview? Go and research, and properly research. I'm not talking about looking stuff up on YouTube, all right? Look at it and see, does that information fit with what the science behind this actually says? Okay, and do I agree with it, and can I do it? Okay, so hopefully that's been helpful. I don't know how long we're sitting at here, because I started again, I think maybe about 40 minutes. So thanks for getting to the end of this. If you've got any questions or comments on this, please do email me, info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk. There's discounts available on my loose lead walking course, my recall course, and my aggression course for people that listen to this podcast using the code podcast30. So podcast30. And I'll put the link in the show notes for the 3 courses. All right. So love and peace to you all. Stay safe. Hope you're getting the vaccine program where you're listening to this from is rolling out effectively. And I know some countries are further ahead than others, but we will get through this, and we'll get through it when we get through it. Okay. It could be another while before, we're going to be living with this for, in some guys, a good many years to come, so, and I know that's not, that's not a proposition that anybody wants to think about, but if we consider it, and prepare ourselves for it, we'll be better able to deal with it as and when it arrives. Okay, so much love to you all. Stay safe, wear your masks, get your vaccinations, and keep your distance from folk, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks, folks.
Massive thanks for listening to this episode. Your feedback is important to us, so if you've got any comments or thoughts on the podcast, or you've got anything that you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please do get in touch. You can find us on all the social media channels, so that's Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. And if you search for Glasgow Dog Trainer and Behaviour Consultant in any of those platforms, you'll find me. Or you can email me info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk. Thanks very much for listening, and your support means the world to us.